Hey everybody. So this is the second part of the two-part series on resume and interview skills. So we're going to be talking about interview skills specifically. Part one was about resume writing and kind of what to put in your resume. So definitely recommend going back and checking that one out. So when we talk about interview skills, first we have to look at the process. So normally in an interview process, either one or two or all of these steps are going to be involved. So there's the phone screen, um, there's the in-person interview, there's an extra potentially there's an exercise or skills assessment, a potential final interview, reference check, offer, and background check. So before you have any type of interview with an organization, you want to do some research on what the company does, the job description of the job posting, where the position is located, all the information you need to ask the questions that you want to ask. Because interviews kind of work both ways, where they're seeing if you're a good fit for the role, but you also want to see if the company is a good fit for you and your lifestyle, your experience, your schedule, all the above. You want to make sure that your resume is updated. Um, and sometimes there may be a lapse of time between when you first posted it to when you're going in for the interview. So you want to make sure that they have the most updated version of your resume. You also want to think about stories and experiences you've had in the workplace or volunteer opportunities or other circumstances that you can go back to because you have a pretty good idea of what they're going to ask. And I'll go over some of those questions later. You also want to think of questions that you want to know about the company. What do you need to know about the role and the company in order for you to make the decision to work there? And then when you're going to an interview in person, you want to make sure to bring 5 to 10 copies of your resume because you never know who you're going to meet there as well. And then you want to bring a pen and notepad for notes, also to take the names down and email addresses of those you met with so you can send them a thank you note afterwards. One of the most common first steps in any interview process is going to be some kind of phone screen. And this could be uh, 10 minutes, this could be 40 minutes. It kind of varies. Sometimes it's just a preliminary call just to get information about you. Sometimes it's to see if they want to move you to the next level. So just be prepared for an hour of your time just in case the conversation goes on quite a bit longer than you expected. When you're on a phone call, you want to make sure you have a quiet location indoors. Definitely don't drive an interview. I've interviewed a lot of people through a phone screen where we had a time set up and they were driving, and one, they're distracted, so they're not answering the questions fully, and two, it's just harder to hear them. Plus, if you're someone like me who bikes to work, I don't like distracted drivers. So definitely don't drive an interview. You want to make sure you're answering questions fully and compactly. It's okay to take a couple seconds when you're asked a question to think about it. I know it may feel like forever on the phone, but it just really think about what the question is asking and um, try to answer quickly and succinctly and not go on and on. Try to have your resume in front of you as well, but don't read directly from it. Don't assume that they have your resume as well. This could be someone who was just told to call you and they want to learn more about you. They may have seen your resume once. It may not be in front of them. So don't assume that they know everything that's on your resume. Maybe have the company information in front of you or know a little bit about the company, but don't type on a keyboard while you're in an interview. And then smile, even though you're on the phone, because there's a lot of studies, and I think just overall, you giving off a more positive vibe and a cheerful vibe when you're smiling on the phone, especially with those customer service um, positions. You definitely want to ask questions, and in another slide, we'll talk about what questions you want to ask. And you also want to send a thank you email. If they want to bring you in for the in-person interview or make an offer, whatever the next step is in their process, they will follow up. For the in-person interview, so you want to make sure you arrive early, so 15 to 25 minutes early, just because you never know what parking will be like, what public transportation will be like. Always leave room for error, and it's always better to be early than late for these things. Dress for the job you want. So even if you know the workplace is casual, which a lot of workplaces are these days, it's always better to overdress. So no jeans, no sneakers. we'll go over in the next slide kind of what that looks like for men and women as well. As I said before, bring a pen, a notepad, bring copies of your resume. Don't assume they have it. Also bring copies of your references. So you are prepared to give that to them should they ask for it. Also be nice to everyone you meet. Often the reception area and dealing with the receptionist or the parking attendant can be part of the interview process as well. So consider the interview is starting the moment you enter the property. Oftentimes hiring managers will go out and ask the receptionist like, hey, how was this person? Were they nice to you? What were they like when they were waiting in the waiting area? So be nice to everyone you meet, and don't be nervous, but it's okay to be a little nervous. But you just want to make sure you're presenting yourself in the best light possible. So when we're talking about what to wear, so generally, business professional clothing, a collared shirt for men, tie, belt, undershirt, just because I think a common thing is those sweat stains that we want to avoid. A suit or sports jacket is optional. Really depends on the role. So if you don't feel comfortable in that, then by all means don't feel like you have to wear it. For women, business suit pants, skirt or dress that's appropriate length. You want to make sure that it's good standing and sitting because you may be doing both in the interview. And then a blouse or collared shirt, minimal jewelry, and hair combed or pulled back. So generally, this is kind of the basic business professional look that you want to go for. And again, you always want to make sure that you don't have any gum on you, that your phone is turned off, you're not receiving calls in the middle of it. You hadn't just smoked or used a vape pen right before you went in, as those smells can stick on your clothes and sometimes be offensive to people with sensitive noses. That you don't have food or drinks with you. Water is okay, and that piercings besides earrings are as professional as possible. And again, that depends on the job. But again, you're just trying to show the best self you can. Okay. So when you are there for the interview in person, we'll talk about your rights on another slide. But you want to make sure you're answering questions fully. Don't just give the answer you want them to know. When it comes to your previous positions, never speak negatively about your previous company or manager position. And there's always those trick questions they'll ask of, tell me about a manager you liked and a manager you didn't like. Or tell me about a bad experience you had at a previous company. Those are trick questions. So never, ever speak negatively about a company. So I used to work for a rent-a-car company, a national rent-a-car company, back in New York, and I was there for 3 years. I worked at different branches, and I had great managers and I had not so great managers. But in an interview, you can be sure I'm only telling stories about the good managers. I'm not even discussing the ones I didn't gel with. And also, too, you want to focus on the growth and learning that you had in each previous position. When they ask, what was the reason for leaving that company, it's okay to be honest, but you can be honest without being negative. So if you didn't like the company, you didn't like their position, you can just say that you were looking for other opportunities, or it wasn't ultimately what you wanted to do, or you moved to a different job. And it's okay to say that without saying something negative about the company. We'll talk about the weakness question on the next slide. It is an outdated question, but it may come up. And ultimately, you don't want to answer with the strength. You want to mention skills that you've improved on. You also want to ask questions, and you also want to send a thank you email to everyone who interviewed you, and also including everyone who set up the interview. So sometimes you'll discuss you'll have HR phone screen you, and then they'll set up the interview, and they'll greet you at the door. So you want to thank them as well for getting you in the door, essentially. The weakness question. So you will get, in some form or another, you will get a question that is, tell me about your strengths and tell me about your weaknesses. Sometimes the weakness question is hidden, and it's tell me about a challenge that you faced at work, or tell me about things you need to improve on, but those are weakness questions. So you want to mention skills that you've improved on. Do not mention a strength that's as a weakness. So don't mention strengths of oh, I work too hard and that's a weakness, or I care too much. Those kinds of things aren't, while depending on the story you tell can be weaknesses, that's not really what the company's looking for. And it doesn't look great when the candidates bring those up. So you want to really mention skills that you've improved on and things that you used to have trouble with. So there's some examples here. So the first one, like I used to wait till the last minute to set up appointments for the coming week, and then I realized that scheduling in advance makes more sense. So I set up a calendar. So I set up calendar reminders for myself. That's a great example because in it you have what the issue was, what you did, what was the action you took to make it better. So you always want to end the weakness question with the action you have done or are doing to improve yourself. And there's some great examples here if you want to pause the screen and look those over. Also, when you're telling stories, they will ask for backup. They will ask follow-up questions to whatever story you ask. So don't make up a story, and also don't say experiences that weren't your fault, because that also is not a weakness. If you bring up a story where it says, oh, well, my manager did this or my coworker did this, those also don't highlight your weaknesses or strengths. The behavior question is also one that'll come up, and this is one you can easily prepare for before you go into any interview or phone screen. And usually they start with, tell me about a time when, describe a situation where when have you had to ... And they're giving you the answer in the second part of that question. So when they say, tell me about a time when you had to diffuse a difficult customer complaint, they are looking for your customer service experience. So all you have to do is think back to a story where you exhibited great customer service experience or a great customer service story, and that's the answer to the question. They're giving you the answer and what they want to hear in this second part. Sometimes they'll preface it saying, this role works with a lot of departments. So then it's a collaboration question or a teamwork question. So you want to think of these stories before you go into the interview, because they're going to come up. These also allow the interviewer really good insight into things that you've done in the past and projects you've worked on. When it comes to your rights, this is of course different depending on what state you're in, but across the board, companies cannot ask about your age, and that includes graduation date, your background, your gender, sex, your religion, your disability, any disabilities you may have, marital or family status. They can ask you to self-select some of these things like disability on the application itself, but you also don't have to. And then in California, specifically LA, they can't ask about salary history. Other states that may not be the case. What they can ask for in California is expected range. And then this question always comes up of what to do if one of these things comes up in an interview. So you have the option to, of course, end the interview because it could be indicative of their policies and practices. You could also politely refuse to answer because their intent may not have been to break the law. As an HR professional, I am always trying to educate the employees on all of these questions and things they can ask. And there have been times where it almost happens in conversation by accident. So someone will say, "Oh, you went to UCLA? My cousin went to that school. What year did you graduate?" And those can be very innocent and unintentional accidents that happen. So that may not have been the company's intent. So it is okay to politely refuse to answer a question that you don't feel comfortable answering. And then, of course, you can always file a charge with the EEOC as well. When it comes to questions that you want to ask them, really think of the questions that you want them to know. Really think of the questions that you want to know about the role or the organization. So the day-to-day responsibilities, the expectations in the first 30, 60, 90 days. Sometimes they may not know depending on who you're talking to in the organization, they may not know where the company is headed for the next 5 years. So maybe you don't want to answer that one unless you truly want to know, but you maybe want to ask about the company culture, the teamwork environment. What's the hardest thing about the role? The last question can be about the next steps in the interview process. Odds are they will tell you the next steps at the end of the interview. And then also try not to ask about salary or benefits just yet until you get into later in the process. Okay. So that was all about interviewing and best tips for the interview process. And if we have a part three, it'll kind of talk about social media and some of the other parts as well. Thank you.